Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today, we'll be discussing a very interesting new Nigerian movie. This is not your typical movie. There's so much to learn from it. So, stay tuned and listen carefully to this amazing story. The movie starts with a woman named Anne. While she's in the living room, her boyfriend Eric calls her name repeatedly and begins scolding her. Eric recently discovered through her messages that she's been cheating on him with another man. Instead of feeling remorseful, Anne tells him she's actually doing him a favor by staying with him. This leads to a heated exchange of hurtful words between them, until Eric finally gets fed up. He decides to marry 3 other women, which makes Anne laugh as he throws her out of his house. The following morning, Eric calls a friend, asking him to arrange 3 women and a pastor because he plans to marry all 3 at once. He explains that he wants one wife to handle the cooking, another to take care of his heart, and a third to be beautiful so he can admire her. Money is no issue for Eric, as long as his friend delivers what he wants. What a surprising decision. Let's see how it all unfolds. Later that day, the first woman, Samantha, is at Eric's house. He explains his plan and asks if she's okay with it. Samantha, more focused on financial security, has no issues as long as her needs are met. Eric assures her it won't be a problem, but when she tries to seduce him, he turns her down, saying he's done with her for now. She leaves happily after he transfers some money to her account, and she starts praising him excitedly. The next day, Eric brings another woman to his home. As she steps out of his car, she celebrates the prospect of marrying a wealthy man like Eric. When her friend calls, she eagerly shares the details of his luxurious house, thrilled with her good fortune. She then follows Eric inside. Later that same day, Eric finds another woman, unconscious in one of his guest rooms. When she wakes up, she's confused about where she is. Eric explains that he accidentally hit her with his car and, because he's allergic to hospitals, brought her to his home. She corrects him on some medical terms, revealing she's a medical student. Curious, he asks why she was at the hospital. She tells him tearfully about being scammed out of her school fees and having no way to pay. Eric promises to cover her tuition, and she gratefully thanks him before he heads to his room, deep in thought. The following morning, Lydia, the woman Eric helped, tells him she's ready for school. Eric transfers money to her account as promised, and she asks if she can visit him occasionally. He gives her permission to come by anytime. Later, Sarah comes to thank Eric for his support. When Eric's friend calls, he tells him he needs a well-mannered woman for his upcoming wedding. Overhearing this, Sarah congratulates him, prompting Eric to ask if she'd consider marrying him. She agrees, but says she'd like to finish her studies first. Before leaving, Eric invites her to lunch. That same day, Eric wonders why Sarah only congratulated him instead of seriously considering his marriage proposal. He decides he'll try again, as he's running out of time to find a wife. All these moments flash through Eric's mind after he marries 3 women. Satisfied and wealthy, he gathers them in the living room and explains their roles in his life. He also mentions that each woman will have 30 minutes of his attention every day, which excites Samantha. Curious, she wonders how he'll manage time for all 3 daily, and he tells them to get ready as they each take turns. While Alice was preparing for her first night with her husband, Sarah came in with her study materials, but Alice kept distracting her with various topics. Samantha then stepped out of her room, looking very attractive, which caught Alice's attention. Alice approached Samantha, sensing she was up to something, as Samantha posed a bit of a threat to her. While they talked about trivial topics, Sarah stayed focused as Samantha went to spend time with Eric. In Eric's room, Samantha arrived excitedly, pleased with what she expected would happen. Eric instructed her to use a cucumber as a form of amusement, which she did with enthusiasm. When she wanted more interaction, this time directly from Eric, he refused but gave her money, which satisfied her as she left the room. Afterward, Alice decided to put on makeup to look as attractive as Samantha. Sarah, watching Alice, was surprised at how uncomfortable Alice seemed in her new outfit. As soon as Samantha left, Alice hurried into Eric's room, eager to impress him. However, Eric was uninterested and told her to pick a cucumber for herself. Alice, missing the point, began eating the cucumber, which irritated Eric. He explained its intended use, but she resisted. Annoyed, he paid her off, and she happily left with her money. Alice then went to Sarah and started gossiping about how Samantha was occupying their husband's time. But Sarah remained quiet and went to visit Eric. In Eric's room, where he lay tired on the bed, he told Sarah to choose a cucumber. Sarah refused and instead asked why he would make such a suggestion. She wanted to understand his problem, but he avoided the topic. Despite his silence, she stayed by his side, asking about his well-being and spending quality time with him. That same night, Alice searched everywhere for Sarah, but couldn't find her. Soon, Sarah emerged from Eric's room, and Alice curiously asked what she did to stay 5 hours there, since Samantha had only lasted about 30 minutes. Sarah didn't say much, explaining she was tired and heading to her room, leaving Alice feeling disappointed with her own experience that night. The next morning, Sarah brought Eric breakfast after he woke up, while Alice was nowhere to be found. When he asked about Alice, Sarah persuaded him to attend church with her. After much convincing, he agreed, surprised by Sarah's gentle persistence. Together, they went to church and returned home. As soon as they arrived, Samantha and Alice began vying for Eric's attention, pulling him in different directions. Samantha managed to lead him to his room, with Sarah following calmly, while Alice mocked Sarah as she went to her own room. Later that night, while Sarah studied for her exams, Samantha and Alice argued outside Eric's door about who would go in first. Alice refused to let Samantha go first, worried that she'd tire Eric out quickly. She shared her experience from the night before, which surprised Samantha. Samantha suggested they go in together to make it a more memorable night, but Alice refused and went in alone. The following morning, Samantha was concerned and wondered why her husband hadn't been intimate with her for a week. Believing herself to be very attractive, she resolved to get Eric's attention until he relented. Later that morning, when Eric opened the door to a knock, Samantha approached him with flirtatious intentions. However, he resisted her advances. She asked why he wouldn't be with her, and he explained that a childhood accident had affected his health, making it impossible for him to fulfill her expectations. Shocked, Samantha insisted her charm could change things. But Eric suggested she use a cucumber instead. After some discussion, he gave her money, which cheered her as she left quietly. That night, Eric shared his story with Alice as well, explaining why he couldn't meet her expectations and that she was free to leave if she couldn't accept it. Surprised, Alice doubted his honesty, but ultimately decided not to leave, as she was more interested in his wealth. He paid her and told her to leave, but she lingered, nagging him before finally leaving. Later that day, Eric confided in Sarah too, explaining his inability to be intimate and the reason he used cucumbers. He also told her how his ex had said no one would ever truly love him. Sarah responded with compassion, reassuring him of her love and pledging to support him in finding a solution, no matter how long it took. Her kind words and presence touched Eric deeply, and as she left with her money, he was moved to tears. Once in her room, Sarah contemplated ways to help her husband and made some phone calls to explore potential solutions. The next day, after Samantha and Alice left the house, Samantha went straight to the house while Alice went to the backyard where Sarah usually studied. Alice began gossiping about Eric's condition, but Sarah found it offensive and firmly told her to avoid discussing such matters. Alice respected her boundary and excused herself from the conversation. Later that day, Samantha's friend came over, and as they chatted in the living room, her friend expressed admiration for Samantha's luxurious lifestyle. She even wished her own husband could match that wealth, though she admitted he was already giving her love, care, attention, and fulfillment in every way. Samantha felt uncomfortable with her friend's words. When Samantha received a phone call, she quickly finished her wine, promised to visit again soon, and saw her friend off. Afterwards, Samantha told Alice about her friend's comments and expressed how her friend assumed she had the perfect life, unaware of her husband's challenges. They laughed about this, even in front of Sarah and Eric. Unbeknownst to them, their comments hurt Eric, who quietly left the room. Sarah tried to intervene, but they only laughed at her, so she left as well. Do you think Eric deserves this? Are Samantha and Alice handling the situation well? Share your thoughts in the comments below. That night, as Sarah wished Eric a good night, he lay awake, wondering why she still cared about him, despite everything. Let's see where this leads. The next morning, Eric held a family meeting in the living room, introducing a man named Ken. Eric announced that Ken's role in the household was to help fulfill the wives' needs in his place. Samantha was overjoyed, her enthusiasm obvious, but Sarah was displeased by the idea. After Eric left, Sarah spoke to him privately in his room, expressing her disappointment. She felt that his solution was improper and said she would not participate. Eric explained that he just wanted to ensure his wives were happy, but Sarah encouraged him to hold on to hope, reassuring him that they could find another solution if he trusted her. Eric, however, walked away. What do you think of Sarah's reaction? Do we still have such devoted people in today's world? That night, Samantha tested Ken's endurance, but he became tired after 9 rounds, leaving her unsatisfied. Let's see how long Ken can last in his new role. The following morning, Samantha and Alice showered Ken with gifts and herbal remedies to help him keep up his stamina. They celebrated with great excitement while Eric watched from the balcony. Back in his room, he was surprised and disheartened to see the gifts they'd bought Ken. Then Sarah entered and gifted him something thoughtful from her recent shopping trip. Touched, Eric thanked her, appreciating how her presence brought him peace. The next day, as Ken went to each wife's room, he found only Sarah at home. When he tried to approach her, she responded with a slap, warning him to keep his distance before leaving the room. Eric, who was watching, observed this without their knowledge. Later, Ken complained to Eric, saying that while the other wives cooperated, Sarah refused him. He even mocked Eric's condition, which angered Eric. Eric responded by firing Ken on the spot, feeling hurt by his comments. That night, Samantha and Alice confronted Eric, demanding he fulfill their needs now that Ken was gone. Do you think Eric can bear this pressure? Let's find out. In time, financial trouble hit Eric's business, and Samantha and Alice pressured him for money, ignoring his explanations. Finally, he told them that the money was in his car and used the chance to escape. Samantha, feeling betrayed, packed her things and urged Alice to do the same. But Alice decided to stay, saying she could still enjoy other comforts in the home. Samantha admitted she was there only for the money and left. Who do you think will leave next? Stay tuned to find out. Weeks later, Sarah came into the living room brimming with excitement. She announced that she'd found a solution for Eric's condition with a specialist in the United States. Eric was taken aback by her dedication, while Sarah eagerly discussed ideas to raise the funds they needed. Impressed, he decided to follow her plan. When it came time for Eric's surgery, Sarah saw him off, and Alice made sarcastic remarks. Eric warmly hugged Sarah before leaving. Do you think Eric will regain his health? Let's wait and see. The next day, Sarah called to thank the doctor for helping her husband, and she spoke to Eric to encourage him, even sharing prayers and Bible verses to support him. Alice, overhearing, showed her support too. During the surgery, Sarah prayed for its success, while Alice busied herself with other activities. Day and night, Sarah continued to pray. Finally, Eric called with good news. The surgery was successful, and his condition was fully restored. He would soon return to Nigeria. When Eric returned, his wives welcomed him home. He brought special gifts for Sarah, though Alice still made sarcastic remarks. They were all happy to see him back, and Eric looked forward to resuming his duties as a husband. This story teaches us that true love exists and that some are willing to fight through challenges for the sake of marriage. What did you learn from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more exciting updates on Nigerian dramas. See you next time.